In today's Nonsense Wars production, we look at two slightly more complicated WeDo 1.0 train automations. 9-volt trains often came with a pamphlet warning about what not to do with the electronics. It specifically says not to make a reversing loop because this track configuration will create a short circuit. But what if we can isolate the two halves of the loop? LEGO effectively makes a purist isolator in the form of FlexTrack. A single piece can electrically separate two sections of track, but still allow a passing 9-volt motor to remain in contact with at least one of the sides. Just to be safe, we will run a locomotive with two powered bogies. Here we have a layout with three electrically isolated blocks, the two curves and the straight, including the two switches. To get a train around this layout, we can fix the polarity of the two curves, but we need to flip the polarity of the straight while the locomotive is in the curves. We operated this setup manually to show that it works. To automate it, we only need one sensor and one motor, since the switches themselves don't need switching. In one of our previous automations, we motorized the regulator to stay within the set, but this time we will set the regulator manually and motorize a power functions pole reverser instead. This should work much more quickly and more reliably, since this switch has a proper cross-axle connection. Again, we use a rubber band such that we could drive the motor more than enough to ensure complete activations. Finally, we put a sensor in the middle of the layout. We know how long it takes for the train to travel from the sensor to the reversing loop, and we switch the polarity of the center section accordingly. The entire program consists of a single line of code blocks. With longer loops, we can have more lenient timings or allow more speeds, but these relatively tight loops can already accommodate running at both notch 3 and notch 4. We did a subtle hack here with the electrical situation. By default, the 9-volt switches isolate the unswitched branch such that trains can park there. We need this section powered for the automation to work, and because we don't want to toggle the switch, we would need to add extra pickups. Nominally, our layout requires 5 electrical connections, 2 for the curves, 1 for the straight, and 2 more for the unswitched branches. However, if we power the trunk of the switch, the contiguous outside rails remain powered, regardless of the switch setting. The point mechanism only isolates one of the 2 inside rails. On the flip side, if we power the unswitched branch, one side of the switched branch does not get powered. If we join 2 such wired switches set in different directions, we can power the trunk and all branches with 2 instead of 3 pickups. This reduces the total number of electrical connections from 5 to 4. Not a huge reduction, but perhaps important when we could only find 4 instead of 5 pickups. In fact, we can remove another set of pickups by removing one of the loops. Using the exact same program, the train will simply reverse at some point given enough track length. Now let's look at a second, admittedly less clever and less complicated automation. Here we have a loop with a siding, a sensor at the throat of the siding, and a revised pole reverser thrower. We geared down the mechanism such that we can set the switch in the off position. When the train passes the sensor, we increase the lap count. Once it does enough laps, in this case 3, it stops briefly, reverses into the siding, and stops for longer. The train then leaves the siding and the lap count resets. The switch always remains pointed at the siding. For this automation, the length of the loop doesn't matter due to the sensor position. The reverse movement down the siding does need timing to know when to stop, but we could also run to another sensor on a much larger implementation. Finally, we should correct something we said in the previous WeDo automation video. The hub does actually output enough power to run a train motor, just not enough to run it with any significant load. One loco and one car is about the best it can do, and even then it sometimes cuts out. So where can this go from here? It's not entirely clear what kind of safeguards we need to run these automations in a production environment. For example, train performance will degrade as motors heat up and as track gets dirty. While this should not affect the siding stop too much, a mistimed switch could short the reversing loop. Let us know in the comments how practical you think 9-volt automation is. On that note, this is the end of the video. Please consider subscribing if you like what we do, and have a nice day.